So can politicians in Washington come up with tax reform that actually makes sense and does something? Well, joining me now, former Texas Congressman and two-time presidential candidate, it's Ron Paul. Welcome back, Dr. Paul.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
So let's talk about taxes a little bit. This is something you have spent an awful lot of time thinking about. In your estimation, what is the most egregious current tax violation as you see it?
I would say there's two that are equal because both attack your income. One is the income tax directly, and that should include the corporate tax. That's always an income tax, too, that's passed on, but also the inflation tax. That's what they do. So I see the problem as a spending problem. Sometimes they tax us, sometimes they borrow, sometimes they print the money. So the talk on tax is very important. We should do whatever we can to lower it. But the truth is the tax is the spending. That's a tax on the system.
Yep.
And this revenue neutral stuff, it's just a bunch of distortions and distractions. But how much really serious talk have you heard recently, other on the Kennedy talking about cut something? Why don't you cut something?
Yeah.
But there's no talk of that. And this, how do you pay for it? If somebody gives me my money back, why do I have to pay for it? We give money back to people.
That's the thing I don't understand. Why does that money have to be shifted to spending programs? It is so incredibly insulting because the burden not only goes to taxpayers, but as you said, it goes on workers' shoulders who don't see where that money is going. And there are all sorts of hidden taxes throughout the system that rob people.
Right. And I think that is an addiction on the spending. So the people have a responsibility, too, because if they vote against all this, they're going to get thrown out. So there is an addiction. But there's also this misconception of Keynesian economists that deficits really aren't all that bad. And even the supply-siders admit to some of this notion, too. Well, what you have is you have dynamic scoring. You cut here, and all of a sudden the economy is going to boom. Well, if the economy booms and the government gets more revenue, that's not an excuse for more government. That's an excuse for more tax cuts.
Yeah.
So
that's right. And
tax
refunds for people so they can take that money and make their own choices and invest in their own companies and businesses as they see fit. You're absolutely right about that. And that is one area where the supply-siders actually go into a bit of a deficit when they talk about, tax cuts are great, but they're not great because they feed government. They're great in and of themselves so people have more money, more choice, and more freedom.
I think it really goes back to the libertarian principle, which I know you understand, and that is we own our lives, and we should own the fruits of our labor. So as soon as they introduce this notion that everything belongs to the government and they will permit us to keep a certain percentage under certain circumstances, all this management, say that it's revenue neutral, it's still a lot of mischief because they want to support one group versus another. Yep. It's all economic management, economic planning, which is so bad, and it rejects the whole notion that we as individuals have a right to our life, our liberty, and we should have the right to the fruits of our labor. But that is a real chore for us to overcome that because it's so ingrained. I predict that things will get much worse. Spending will continue. Deficits will get worse. And these problems will happen until finally we as a people will have to decide, you want to live in a more libertarian society or you just want to live in a more authoritarian society? And that's where the battle is right now. And in Washington, it's usually a battle between two different types of authoritarianism. You only hear the real message outside of Washington, hey, maybe government shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't run a welfare warfare state. Maybe there's a different role for the government. Maybe we ought to even check on the Constitution for some guidance. But we're not quite there yet. But I believe we are actually making some progress along that line.
Well, I agree with you. I share your optimism. And, you talking about this and sharing your message at the top of the show goes a long way. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul.